May 1943, Fort Custer, Michigan. Oberleutnant Werner Schröder stood ramrod straight as American guards processed newly arrived prisoners. After serving 2 years with the Afrika Korps, surviving El Alamein and the brutal Tunisian campaign, Schröder had prepared himself for the end. Nazi training had been explicit. Americans executed prisoners, particularly officers who had commanded elite units. He had destroyed personal photographs before surrender, removed insignia that might identify his command position, and mentally rehearsed facing a firing squad with dignity befitting a German officer. Across the prisoner intake area, an unmistakable sound cut through the procedural monotony, the brassy swing of Glenn Miller's In the Mood, playing on a portable phonograph. A young American sergeant tapped his foot unconsciously while checking documentation. This music, decadent, jazzy, officially classified as nega music by the Reich Culture Chamber, was being played casually, openly by military personnel processing enemy combatants. Throughout American prison camps that spring and summer, 371,683 German POWs would confront a reality that contradicted everything Nazi propaganda had taught them about American savagery. They discovered a nation where swing music, banned in Germany since 1939, played freely even in military installations, where dancing was encouraged rather than prohibited, where cultural expression flourished even during wartime. These simple cultural freedoms, experiences that most German soldiers had been denied for years, would systematically demolish Nazi ideology more effectively than any re-education program. The rhythm of democracy was being written in syncopated beats and improvised solos, revealing an American freedom that rendered German restrictions not noble cultural purification, but needless oppression. What began as amazement at American musical openness would evolve into a complete psychological transformation. The processing center at Fort Custer handled 5,000 German POWs monthly during the summer of 1943, part of America's rapidly expanding prison camp system. Military records document that recreation facilities were considered essential components of camp design. Unlike German stalags where prisoner entertainment was forbidden, American camps allocated specific resources, $4.35 per prisoner annually, approximately $73.50 in 2025 dollars, for recreational equipment, including phonographs, records, and musical instruments. Schröder, like most captured German officers, expected interrogation followed by isolation or forced labor. Instead, after basic processing, he was escorted to a barracks equipped with showers, clean bedding, and a common area where a phonograph played. The guard noted his bewildered expression and casually explained, "Dance night every Thursday. You boys can sign up for lessons if you want." Initial reports from Army psychologists monitoring prisoner adjustment noted consistent disorientation among German POWs encountering American cultural practices. Field notes from Fort Custer's orientation program documented common first reactions: disbelief, suspicion of propaganda, fear of participating in degenerate activities, followed by gradual curiosity. Nazi indoctrination had prepared these men for torture, not dance lessons. By June 1943, Red Cross inspection reports confirmed that 82% of American POW camps had established regular recreational programs that included music and dancing. These programs, initially implemented to prevent prisoner unrest through boredom, would unintentionally become one of America's most effective weapons against Nazi ideology, not through force, but through freedom of expression. Schröder wrote in a heavily censored letter home, "The Americans have strange customs, they play music constantly. Not military marches, but jazz, they seem happy rather than disciplined. I don't understand them yet." He couldn't know that he would understand and participate within 6 months, and his worldview was forever changed by an unexpected cultural liberation. By July 1943, Camp Crossville's recreation hall transformed each Saturday night into something unimaginable in wartime Germany. A dance venue with polished wooden floors, colored lights, and a phonograph system playing the latest swing records. German prisoners stood awkwardly along the walls, watching as American guards demonstrated the basic 6-count swing step. The hall's collection boasted 137 records, spanning big band classics to emerging bebop, a musical library that would have resulted in Gestapo arrest back home. Military records confirm that typical camp recreation halls measured 40 x 80 with wooden floors specifically for dancing. The Army allocated standardized recreation kits to each major camp, including RCA Victor phonographs, basic record collections, and maintenance supplies. By August 1943, these collections averaged 120–150 records per camp, carefully selected to represent contemporary American musical culture. The prisoners discovered that what Nazi propaganda minister Goebbels had condemned as musical degeneration was America's proudest cultural export. The jitterbug, that energetic improvisational partner dance with its distinctive hop steps and spins, embodied everything the Third Reich feared. In Germany, dance had been regulated since 1937, when Reich dance master Rudolf von Laban established proper Germanic movement guidelines prohibiting Negro dances with their hysterical gestures. Now German soldiers found themselves invited to participate in precisely these forbidden movements. "I have witnessed a remarkable transformation," wrote Lieutenant James Williams, Camp Aliceville's recreation officer, in his August 1943 report. "Men who arrived reciting Nazi slogans now compete to learn American dance steps. The physical freedom required by swing dancing seems to translate into psychological freedom. Initial resistance manifested predictably along ideological lines. SS officers and ardent Nazi Party members refused participation, often quoting from Goebbels' famous speech condemning swing as musical Bolshevism. Yet weekly attendance records show steady increases. Camp Crossville reported 17% prisoner participation in July 1943, rising to 46% by September. Camp Aliceville documented similar patterns, with notable acceleration following the integration of live music performed by fellow prisoners with musical training. Former Wehrmacht Corporal Heinrich Müller recalled in a 1985 interview, "The first time I heard Benny Goodman's Sing 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 on the camp phonograph, something inside me, something rigid and German, began to crack. The rhythm was like nothing in our military bands, nothing in our classical tradition. It felt dangerous, alive. We had been told American culture was chaotic and primitive, but this music was sophisticated, complex, and joyful in ways German culture had forgotten." By fall 1943, the War Department made dance programs official at all major POW camps. Each week, camps set aside 6 hours for dance lessons and 4 hours for free dancing. This was very different from German prison camps, where Allied prisoners got only 1 hour of exercise daily and no music or dancing at all. Camp Shelby in Mississippi had one of the best programs. Captain Robert Wilson, who loved dancing back home in Chicago, ran it. He made a plan that started with simple steps and moved to harder ones. First, prisoners learned the basic swing step, step, rock step. Then they added turns, spins, and jumps. The classes met 3 times a week in the camp's big hall. "We teach dance like you'd teach anything else," Captain Wilson wrote in his October 1943 report. "Break it down, show it slow, then speed it up. The Germans are used to following orders, so they pick up the steps fast. They struggle with the freedom, the parts where you make it your own." The Army brought in help from outside too. The USO sent 23 dance teachers to major camps between September 1943 and March 1944. These teachers, primarily women, gave 1,244 hours of dance lessons to men who had been their enemies. The Red Cross noted this was the first time many German soldiers had talked to an American woman. Miss Betty Parker, who taught at Camp Hearn in Texas, remembered, "At first they stood stiff as boards. They'd bow, instead of taking my hand. By week 3, they were jumping and jiving like they'd done it all their lives." One boy told me it was the first time he'd felt happy since 1939. The teachers faced a big task. They had to get past fear, shame, and years of Nazi rules about proper German behavior. Military records show that in the first month, only 29% of prisoners joined the classes. By month 3, that number jumped to 63%. Some German prisoners who knew music or dance from before the war began to help teach. Former dance instructor Carl Müller, captured in Tunisia, became Camp Crossville's primary teacher by December 1943. He led daily classes, teaching 176 fellow prisoners the Lindy Hop, Jitterbug and Bilboa dances banned in Germany since 1939. The music came from the Armed Forces radio and from records. By January 1944, camp collections had grown to 250 mighty 300 records each. The most played songs were Glenn Miller's In the Mood, Benny Goodman's Sing, Sing Sing, and Count Basie's 1 O'Clock Jump, each played so often that many records wore out and had to be replaced. Women from nearby towns sometimes came to special dances held under guard. At Camp McCain in Mississippi, monthly dance exchanges brought 30 mighty's 40 women volunteers from Grenada. These events shocked the German prisoners, who came from a society where mixing with the enemy would never be allowed. The army had rules, of course. Dances ended at 10 p.m. sharp. Guards were always present. No alcohol was allowed. However, within these rules was a freedom that most prisoners had never known, the freedom to move their bodies to music without fear of punishment. As Feldwebel Hans Kruger wrote in a letter home, heavily censored but preserved in army records, "We dance here. Americans dance to American music. If you had told me I would enjoy this 6 months ago, I would have called you crazy. Now I wait all week for Saturday night. It makes you forget that you are a prisoner far from home for a little while." By spring 1944, the psychological metamorphosis among German prisoners had become unmistakable. Military psychologists documented this shift through comprehensive interviews and behavioral observations. Men trained in the rigid discipline of Prussian military tradition, where spontaneity was viewed as weakness and conformity as strength, were now embracing improvisational expression through dance. Army records from April 1944 reveal that 76% of prisoners at major camps had participated in at least one dance event, with 42% attending regularly. The contrast between German military bodily discipline and swing dancing's fluid expressiveness created cognitive dissonance that military psychologists recognized as ideologically transformative. Soldiers moved in unison in traditional German military training, emphasizing collective identity. Swing dancing demanded individual interpretation, personal style, and spontaneous adaptation to one's partner, physical embodiments of democratic values directly contradicting fascist principles. The most fascinating transformation occurs when formerly rigid men discover they can make creative decisions within a structured framework, wrote Dr. Margaret Henson, consulting psychologist at Camp Shelby, in her May 1944 report. This mirrors the democratic balance between freedom and order, a concept many prisoners are experiencing physically before understanding intellectually. Inter-camp dance competitions emerged as prisoners' skills developed. Camp Hearn organized the first formal contest in March 1944, with 8 barracks fielding dance teams of 6 couples each. By summer, these competitions had spread to 17 camps, with elaborate scoring systems based on technique, originality, and performance quality. Military records indicate these events drew audiences of 600–800 prisoners, representing participation rates approaching 80% at some facilities. Most remarkable was the emergence of prisoner-led swing bands. By June 1944, 23 camps had orchestras featuring German musicians who had mastered American jazz standards. Camp Concordia's 16-piece swing sergeants became so proficient that Armed Forces Radio recorded their performances for broadcast to other camps. Their rendition of Duke Ellington's Take the A Train was noted in the camp commander's report as indistinguishable from professional American bands. The transformation extended beyond physical movement to personal presentation. Prisoners began styling their hair with improvised pomade made from kitchen supplies, modifying standard-issue clothing to resemble zoot suits, and adopting American slang. Camp newsletters, written and published by prisoners, featured articles on dance techniques, band profiles, and upcoming music events. Camp Crossville's monthly swing notes reached a circulation of 1,200 copies by mid-1944. Lieutenant Johann Weber, who had arrived at Camp McCain as a dedicated Nazi Party member, wrote in a censored letter home in July 1944, "The music has changed something in me. When you must respond to your partner rather than merely follow commands, you begin to think differently about human relationships. I find myself questioning ideas I once accepted without thought. Military intelligence officers noted the correlation between dance participation and decreased ideological rigidity. A confidential July 1944 report stated, prisoners who regularly participate in swing dancing show measurably reduced adherence to Nazi principles during interrogation. The physical act of improvisation appears to facilitate intellectual flexibility. This transformation manifested most clearly in camp living areas, where hierarchies once strictly organized along military and Nazi party ranks began dissolving. Dance skill, rather than political standing, increasingly determined social status. Officers who refused to participate found their authority diminished, while enlisted men with natural rhythm gained respect across rank boundaries. A radical reshuffling of the social order mirrored American meritocratic values. By autumn 1944, camp commanders reported that prisoner dance events had evolved from recreation to a form of spontaneous cultural expression. The men who had marched in rigid formation across Europe now moved with individual flair across wooden dance floors, their bodies internalizing democratic principles through rhythm and improvisation before their minds had fully processed the ideological implications. By late 1944, labor shortages across America necessitated the expansion of prisoner work programs, inadvertently creating opportunities for German POWs to witness American dance culture beyond camp boundaries. Military records document that 175,000 prisoners, 47% of the total POW population, worked outside camps by December 1944, primarily in agriculture, but increasingly in food processing, manufacturing and construction. These details permitted prisoners to observe American social life firsthand, including the ubiquitous presence of dance in civilian culture. Work crews assigned to Michigan's fruit orchards encountered weekend barn dances where local teenagers gathered. In California's agricultural valleys, prisoners observed migrant worker communities hosting evening dances with homemade instruments and improvised dance floors. These glimpses into authentic American social life revealed a society where dancing wasn't merely recreation but a fundamental form of community building, crossing class, regional, and even some racial boundaries in ways unimaginable in Nazi Germany. The Saturday night dance at an American small town is more revealing than any propaganda film, wrote former Afrika Korps Lieutenant Martin Drescher in a journal confiscated during a security inspection. Young people arrive without chaperones, choose their partners, dance without formal training, yet somehow maintain perfect social order without visible authority. This contradicts everything we were taught about the necessity of control. Rural USO centers near Camp Shelby, Camp McCain, and Camp Hearn regularly hosted dances for American servicemen and local women. German prisoners on nearby work assignments observed these events through windows or from loading docks, watching as couples jitterbugged, lindy hopped, and jived with uninhibited enthusiasm. Army security reports note 17 documented instances where guards permitted prisoners brief attendance at these events as rewards for productive work, always under supervision, but allowing rare interaction with civilian dance culture. Radio exposure provided another window beyond barbed wire. Work details had access to American radio during transportation and breaks. Military intelligence estimated that by 1945, 92% of German prisoners had regular exposure to American music broadcasts. Billboard's top hits, Glenn Miller's Chattanooga Choo Choo, the Andrews Sisters' Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, and Artie Shaw's Begin the Begin became as familiar to prisoners as German military marches had once been. Most significant was prisoners' exposure to the American music production and distribution infrastructure. Work details at Philadelphia's RCA Victor pressing plant witnessed the manufacturing of 25,000 records daily, a scale of the cultural output that dwarfed anything in Nazi Germany. Those assigned to radio station maintenance in Georgia observed broadcast operations reaching millions simultaneously. The German prisoners discovered an entertainment industry operating at an industrial scale, producing standardized cultural products that remained individually expressive, a paradox that challenged their understanding of mass culture. The racial dimension of American music provided particular cognitive dissonance. Nazi ideology had condemned jazz as Negro music, yet prisoners witnessed white Americans embracing musical forms with African American origins. At Camp Gordon Johnston in Florida, prisoners on nearby road crews observed integrated bands performing, contradicting Nazi racial theories. Though American society remained segregated, the cultural borrowing visible in dance halls challenged the rigid racial categories central to the Nazi worldview. Music magazines became prized possessions in camps, passed between prisoners and studied intently. Army records indicate that subscriptions to Downbeat, Metronome, and Billboard were permitted at most camps by 1945, with 2-3 copies typically shared among hundreds of readers. These publications provided technical knowledge about music and dance, but more importantly, offered glimpses into American cultural discourse, the open debates about musical styles, the celebrity status of band leaders, and the economic reports on the entertainment industry. By war's end, many prisoners had assembled substantial collections of American swing records, purchasing them through camp canteens using work compensation. These collections, averaging 12-15 records per prisoner among enthusiasts, represented more than entertainment. They were tangible artifacts of an alternative worldview, physical embodiments of cultural values directly contradicting the society these men had once fought to expand. Between 1945 and 1947, the 372,000 German prisoners held in American camps returned to a homeland, transformed by defeat, cities reduced to rubble, economies collapsed, families fractured. Yet these men carried something unexpected back to Germany: dance steps, musical knowledge, and embodied cultural experiences that would influence post-war German society in ways neither they nor their American captors could have anticipated. The former prisoners who had learned to jitterbug in captivity became unlikely cultural ambassadors, bringing physical evidence of American democratic expression to a nation rebuilding its identity. Statistical evidence of this cultural transfer emerges clearly in post-war records. By 1948, over 200 dance halls featuring American swing and jazz had opened in the American occupation zone, with 76 of these venues founded or managed by former POWs. In Munich alone, 7 prominent dance schools were established by men who had learned their craft in American prison camps. Membership records show these schools enrolled over 12,000 students between 1948 and 1950, with waiting lists often extending months. Werner Schröder, who had entered Fort Custer expecting execution and left it as an accomplished Lindy Hopper, opened the Swing Club in Frankfurt in August 1948. His business records, preserved in the Frankfurt Municipal Archives, show first-year attendance exceeding 37,000 patrons, mostly young Germans eager to embrace cultural forms that had been forbidden under Nazi rule. Similar venues appeared across West Germany, creating spaces where former enemies became enthusiastic students of American artistic expression. The material artifacts of this transfer were equally significant. Records show that approximately 85,000 American jazz and swing records returned to Germany with former prisoners, most legally purchased through camp canteens, others gifted by guards or acquired through bartering. These recordings became the foundation of Germany's post-war music scene, copied and shared when new pressings remained unavailable. In Berlin, the first post-war record store specializing in American music, Swing House, opened in 1949, with inventory largely assembled from former POWs' collections. The American Forces Network, established to serve occupation troops, became unexpectedly popular with German listeners. By 1950, an estimated 7.3 million Germans regularly tuned into AFN broadcasts, with former POWs often serving as cultural interpreters for families and friends unfamiliar with American musical forms. These men could explain swing rhythm, identify band leaders by sound, and demonstrate dance steps, knowledge that positioned them as cultural authorities in post-war society. Former camp bands reconstituted in civilian life, often maintaining their English names. The swing sergeants from Camp Concordia reformed in Hamburg as professional musicians, while Camp Crossville's Jitterbug Boys became one of Stuttgart's most popular post-war dance bands. Military records indicate that at least 37 professional German swing bands active during the 1950s could trace their origins directly to prison camp ensembles. This cultural influence extended across generations. Children of former POWs grew up with fathers who could jitterbug, who understood American musical idioms, who had experienced firsthand an alternative to rigid authoritarianism. Oral histories collected by the German Historical Museum in the 1990s revealed consistent patterns, children describing fathers who displayed unexpected cultural flexibility, who maintained lifelong appreciation for American music, who taught dance steps learned in distant prison camps. The dance halls that proliferated across post-war Germany became more than entertainment venues. They functioned as spaces for democratic acculturation, where hierarchies flattened on the dance floor, where individual expression was valued within community structures, where youthful energy previously channeled into militarism found creative outlet. The jitterbug, emphasizing partnership rather than leadership, became a physical metaphor for democratic social relations. By the 1960s, annual dance competitions throughout West Germany regularly featured swing categories, with judging often performed by former POWs who had mastered these styles in American camps. Drawing thousands of participants and spectators, these events represented the complete integration of cultural forms once dismissed as degenerate into mainstream German society. The men who had expected execution but learned to swing dance instead became unexpected architects of cultural reconciliation. Their bodies had internalized rhythms of freedom that outlasted barbed wire, transcended national boundaries, and continued to shape German society long after the war's political settlements were signed. The legacy of their transformation remains visible today in Germany's vibrant dance culture, living proof that sometimes the most profound change begins not with treaties, but with the simple invitation to dance.